Hello YouTube! In this video we're going to look at what's known as the strong program in the sociology of science proposed by sociologist David Bloor. Now, as this suggests, the strong program is really more of a project within sociology of science than philosophy of science, and most of the work done by its adherents involves sociological and historical studies of specific events in science. However, the strong program is built on some controversial philosophical foundations, and it received quite a lot of attention, mostly negative, from philosophers. And more broadly, the strong program played an important role in the science wars of the 90s because it advanced a thoroughly relativist, social constructivist view of scientific knowledge, which, well, I may talk about that in a later video, but here I just want to focus on the philosophical foundations of the strong program. So the original manifesto of the strong program is the book Knowledge and Social Imagery by David Bloor. The interesting thing about this book is that although the strong program is openly relativist and constructivist, Bloor reaches this position by trying to develop a thoroughly materialist, naturalist, scientific approach to understanding science. So the general goal of the strong program is to construct a science of science, to investigate and explain science itself scientifically. Bloor wants to apply scientific tools and scientific methodology to science itself. He wants to develop scientific models of scientific knowledge. Science is, of course, a social institution, so sociology will play a significant role here. Basically, Bloor thinks that sociology is, or ought to be, scientific, and we ought to develop sociological theories for all aspects of society, including the sciences. And so I just say this, because again, when you talk about relativism and constructivism, that's often seen as being kind of anti-science or sort of, wishy-washy or whatever. Bloor is thoroughly and openly scientistic. He's trying to make sociology into a science. Okay, so with that said, what exactly is the strong program? Well, Bloor contrasts the strong program with what he calls the weak program. And I think explaining a bit about what this is will help to illuminate what Bloor is doing. So the weak program is associated with the earlier generation of sociologists of science, particularly the sociologist Robert Merton. Now, I should say that these sociologists don't call themselves, the weak program. The weak program is Bloor's terminology, but we will use that here. So the weak program attempts to understand and explain the institutional structures of science. We will ask questions such as, what is it that motivates scientists? What kinds of norms govern their behaviour? How are research groups organised? How is funding allocated? And so on. In particular, I think what most adherents to the weak program would say is, there's something very special about science relative to other human institutions. Science is uniquely placed to uncover facts about the world, to generate rational belief. But why is this, right? What is it about the structure of scientific organizations that allows it to be so successful at doing this? What is it about the way that science is organized that allows it to generate, credible, rational belief? So just to give a quick example of this kind of work, here Merton proposed 4 norms that govern scientific communities. So first, there is what he called communism. This is the norm of common ownership of scientific goods. Data, evidence, theories, methods, and so on. These are all the common property of every scientist. Any scientist can make use of the ideas of any other scientist. Scientists do get credit for new ideas, but they do not in any sense own the ideas, and they can't dictate how those ideas will be used by others. So I can use your evidence in support of my own theories. Provided I give you credit, I can't be accused of stealing anything from you, right? Once you have generated some evidence, it's out there, it's in the scientific community, and it's available for all. Similarly, when you generate a theory, it's in the scientific community, it's available for all. Second, there is universalism. Ideas in science are judged on their own terms, as it were. The personal characteristics of the scientist or group of scientists associated with those ideas are irrelevant. Race, class, sex, social status, personal attributes, all of this have no bearing on, whether an experiment is properly controlled or whether a theory is well supported. So, you don't, a good example of the sort of violation of this norm would be in, Nazi Germany, when they rejected general relativity and so on because it was seen as Jewish science, or the Soviet rejection of Mendelian genetics because it was seen as bourgeois science. Right? That's not appropriate within scientific institutions. Right? You do not reject an idea because of its provenance. Third, disinterestedness. Scientists generally act for the benefit of science itself, not for personal gain, not for political motivation or anything like that. Scientists are acting so as to benefit science. People don't generally enter science in order to, make money or achieve fame or whatever. Obviously, everybody has self-interested motivations, but the majority of scientists who do so, the majority of scientists who pursue a career in science do so because they are motivated to contribute to the growth of knowledge. And scientific institutions have various mechanisms for selecting people with such inclinations and for reinforcing these inclinations. So again, it's a matter of when you evaluate scientific ideas, right, your goal is just to find out what the facts are, or to find the theory that best accommodates the evidence, regardless of your sort of personal interests or political interests or whatever. Finally, there is organised skepticism. All data, all theories, all methods are in principle open to scrutiny. No ideas are accepted merely on the basis of convention or authority. There's a general skeptical attitude, right? A general attitude that all of these things are open to challenge. But this skepticism must be organised. Scientists won't just raise doubts wherever they can. This is perhaps a difference between scientists and philosophers. Philosophers are constantly raising doubts about everything, anywhere they can. Scientists won't do that, right? In science, there are specific institutional mechanisms for raising challenges to scientific ideas, mechanisms like peer review, or consider how theories must be formulated in such a way as to derive testable predictions. So scientists are then able to challenge them by performing experiments. There are specific mechanisms by which the skeptical attitudes, through which the skeptical attitudes are challenged. So everything's open to challenge, but it's organised. Okay, so all of these norms are, of course, sometimes violated. That's the case with norms in general. The claim is just that science usually follows these norms, and these norms play an important role in creating the conditions for reliable scientific work to take place. Okay, so hopefully you can see that what Merton is doing is looking at scientific institutions and trying to figure out the ways in which they are organised. The week programme tells us quite a lot about science as a social institution. It can tell us what features of science make it the best at getting at the facts, say. But the week programme does not attempt to provide sociological models to explain the content of scientific theories. There can be no sociological explanation for why scientists accept, say, the germ theory of disease or the Big Bang model of cosmology. The week programme asks, what sort of organisation promotes the production of scientific knowledge? But the specific details of scientific knowledge, the specific theories that are accepted, are outside the scope of sociological explanation. Now, in the more general tradition of sociology of knowledge, sociologists do attempt to give causal explanations for the specific beliefs of particular cultures. When we look at different societies or different groups in our own society, we find great variation in belief, and the sociologist of knowledge attempts to show how different beliefs arise from different social circumstances. Consider Marxist explanations for how particular economic theories may be favoured in order to further class interests, or how we might, for instance, explain why creationists refuse to accept evolutionary theory by citing their upbringing in a highly religious, socially conservative culture, plus their desire to maintain the authority of religion in the face of perceived threats. Or we might explain the prevalence of conspiracy theories like QAnon by citing people's prior political commitments combined with how, I don't know, the structure of, let's say the structure of social media encourages the formation of echo chambers, or how algorithms on YouTube tend to encourage people to view increasingly radicalized material. Obviously, none of these are particularly detailed explanations, but we could elaborate on these ideas, and some people have elaborated on these ideas. It's perfectly legitimate for sociologists to ask, why do people believe the QAnon conspiracy theory, and then to elaborate causal models that explain how this belief arose and spread. Sociologists apply scientific methods to explain conspiracies, myths, religions, many other kinds of beliefs. Now, the Strong program simply says we should extend this kind of investigation to scientific beliefs as well. Scientists are, after all, another social group, so their beliefs should be the subject of sociological investigation. As Bloor says, and I quote, "All knowledge, whether it be in the empirical sciences or even in mathematics, should be treated as material for investigation." So, just as sociologists try to develop causal models to explain why Trump supporters endorse the QAnon conspiracy theory, so they should develop causal models to explain why cosmologists believe the Big Bang model. So that's the goal, right? Apply science to itself. Explain scientific knowledge in scientific terms. The Strong program is supposed to be thoroughly scientific, and like other sciences, the Strong program is going to adopt a naturalistic approach. Scientific knowledge is a natural phenomenon, which has particular material causes and material effects. Now, the first step then is to define knowledge in naturalistic terms. According to Bloor, knowledge is simply the collection of, and I quote, "those beliefs which people confidently hold to and live by." And in particular, it's those beliefs that have been invested with authority by certain groups. So when Bloor talks about knowledge, right, he's not defining the term as the philosopher would. He's not sort of defining it in terms of justified true belief or anything like that. Because if we're talking about justified true belief, well, that's going to raise, okay, how do we identify that, right? I mean, so if we want to do a scientific study of something, we first of all need to identify what that thing is. If we want to scientifically study knowledge, we need to identify what knowledge is. Now, if we define knowledge as justified true belief, how do we identify what justified true belief is? This raises a host of philosophical problems, right? I mean, there's going to be much debate over the conditions under which a belief is justified, or what makes a belief true, or whatever. These philosophical debates would get in the way of doing empirical science. So for Bloor, right, knowledge just consists of those beliefs that have achieved a consensus among certain institutions within society. So, scientific institutions, right, will form consensus on particular theories, right? That's knowledge. So the task for the sociologist then is to construct causal models of these beliefs. And whether the investigator considers such beliefs to be true or false, rational or irrational, is irrelevant. The question for the sociologist is simply, what has caused this belief to achieve a consensus and to be invested with credibility by the relevant social institutions? More precisely, Bloor stipulates that the Strong program must adhere to 4 principles. The first principle is what he calls causality. So he says, it would be causal, that is, concerned with the conditions which bring about beliefs or states of knowledge. Naturally, there will be other types of causes apart from social ones which will cooperate in bringing about belief. So, I mean, this is just the commitment to naturalism, right? It's the task of science to construct causal models that explain how particular phenomena come about. Second, impartiality. It would be impartial with respect to truth and falsity, rationality and irrationality, success or failure. Both sides of these dichotomies will require explanation. The point here is that the sociologist is explaining why particular beliefs have achieved consensus. Now, if the sociologist were to focus only on those research programs that we now consider to be true or that we now consider to be successful, that would give us a distorted, Whiggish picture of the development of science. Consider how biological models explain both health and disease, or how mechanical models explain machines that work and machines that fail. Similarly, the Strong Programme demands sociological laws and models that apply to all beliefs. Okay, third, symmetry. It would be symmetrical in its style of explanation. The same types of causes would explain, say, true and false beliefs. Now, this principle is somewhat tricky to interpret and has been the source of much of the debate about the Strong Programme. What does it mean to say that two causes are of the same type? How are we classifying causes? So, as Larry Loudon notes in his article, The Pseudoscience of Science, when we're explaining a person's beliefs, there are all kinds of things we might cite. So we might cite their stated reasons for their belief, we might cite their socioeconomic status, we might cite certain psychoanalytic factors, or certain neural structures, or interactions with authority figures and friend groups, and so on and so on. I mean, there's all sorts of causes that might play a role in bringing about belief. Are all of these things the same type of cause? Well, perhaps. I mean, they are all broadly naturalistic. They don't. None of these things involve citing supernatural intervention or anything like that. On the other hand, all of these factors involve very different mechanisms, and they appeal to very different background theories. So, if we're using this more fine-grained taxonomy of causal types, then I think symmetry is just clearly implausible. There's no reason at all to think that just one of these factors or some specific combination of these factors is at work in the production of all beliefs. And nothing in Bloor's text argues for that. So that's probably not what symmetry is intended to mean. Loudon suggests an alternative reading of symmetry that I think is more plausible. He says, whatever causal mechanisms we find useful for explaining beliefs, we should invoke them without reference to the epistemic or the rationality or the pragmatic status of the beliefs we want to explain. So the symmetry thesis construed in this way asserts that the truth or rationality of a belief is explanatorily irrelevant to a scientific, naturalistic account of how the community came to have that belief. If we ask, why did physicists in the early 1900s form a consensus on general relativity, the symmetry principle will rule out saying, because it is true, or because it was rational, as part of the answer. After all, everybody believes that the theories that they accept are true and rational. We may well think that general relativity is true and rational, but the symmetry thesis precludes us from allowing our own personal evaluation of general relativity to influence the causal models that we use to explain its acceptance. We've just got to focus on what the causes are without evaluating, again, its truth or rationality or other epistemic status. For any theory accepted by scientists, or any other group for that matter, we can ask why that theory is held. According to the symmetry thesis, the explanation should be in terms of the local causes, the psychological and social causes that we would appeal to in explaining other human actions. And these can include all sorts of things, right? I mean, like class interests, desire for fame and prestige, desire to uphold the social order, religious biases, commitment to, people's commitment to certain norms, and then the social institutions that enforce those norms, etc. There's all sorts of things that we can appeal to here. And the point is, we can use these explanations regardless of our evaluation of the epistemic status of the belief. This is the idea of the symmetry principle. The sociologist has to explain all beliefs just in causal terms. Okay, finally, final principle, reflexivity. It would be reflexive. In principle, its patterns of explanation would have to be applicable to sociology itself, as Bloor says. Now, obviously, this principle is required because if we are explaining the construction of knowledge and theories and so on, we would also need to cover sociological knowledge, sociological theories. Strong program sociology is a science, or at least it aspires to scientific status, and a scientific theory of scientific theories would obviously have to apply to itself. It would have to be reflexive. Okay, well, those are the principles, and these are, according to Bloor, exactly the standards assumed in other scientific disciplines. Sociology of science will only achieve a properly scientific foundation once it adopts these principles. So the strong programme promises the only way for science to know itself scientifically. Now, the primary source of resistance to the strong programme, according to Bloor at least, is the tendency to treat knowledge as being autonomous from or outside the scope of normal causal explanation. Even people who are otherwise committed to naturalism make the implicit assumption that naturalistic models do not apply to knowledge itself, that knowledge itself is somehow, it can't be conceived as a natural phenomenon. At least this is Bloor's claim, right? He thinks that a lot of the resistance to the strong programme arises from a kind of implicit non-naturalism about knowledge. So the standard view then is going to be that beliefs are divided into two types. So these might be, the true versus the false, or the rational versus the irrational, or the right versus the wrong, the justified versus the unjustified. Then the idea is that if I am believing rationally, then I am reasoning in accordance with logic and other correct epistemic principles. Rational belief is explained by my reasoning in accordance with the correct norms of belief formation. In other words, the thought is, when a person holds a rational belief, their belief is explained by saying that they have formed that belief in accordance with reason. Sociological and psychological factors are required to explain the negative side, to explain the deviations from rationality. A deviation from rationality must be due to interference from other factors, right? And these other factors are explained by sociology and psychology. So basically, on this standard view, right, the thought is that there's a certain way that people ought to form beliefs. And when people fail to do this, social and psychological explanation is called for. We might say that the subject is just too complex for the individual to properly comprehend, or that their inferences have been affected by cognitive biases, or that they're being inattentive, or that perhaps there's some external compulsion, as when the Soviet government persecuted scientists who rejected Lysenkoism. So when we ask, why did Soviet scientists endorse Lysenkoism, we answer that by specifying their social circumstances. But no such sociological explanation is required for the rational beliefs. When we ask, why did British scientists endorse Mendelian genetics, we answer that by showing how Mendelian genetics was the rational option given the evidence. We answer that by displaying the reasons in favour of Mendelian genetics. So the result is that truth, logic, rationality are their own explanation. To use Bloor's analogy, rational rules are like train tracks. When a train proceeds smoothly down the tracks, we can explain its direction of movement by saying hey, look, it's fixed to the tracks, and this is the direction of the tracks. And no further explanation is required because the train tracks themselves determine where the train will go. We only investigate other interfering causes when the train is derailed. So similarly, the canons of rationality, specified by philosophers and logicians, they dictate where our beliefs will go when we're believing rationally, and further explanation from sociologists must be invoked when people go off course. It's the task of philosophers and logicians to articulate the proper scientific method, let's say. Scientists will only imperfectly follow this method, obviously, and then sociological explanations, as Bloor puts it, can only close the gap between rationality and actuality. The sociologist is tasked with documenting the obstacles and impediments, the external influences that have driven people off the tracks of rational belief. As a result, and in contrast to symmetry, the epistemic status of a theory is relevant to the causes and mechanisms that are invoked to explain why that theory was accepted. We must first judge whether the theory was rational, and this will influence the explanation that we give for its acceptance. Now, as I say, this, as Bloor sees it, is just a kind of general implicit assumption, and there are a few different ways to articulate this kind of position. So one way to articulate this position is to suppose that no causal explanation at all can be given for rational belief. Bloor calls this the teleological model. On the teleological model, truth and rationality are thought of as being our natural goals. We are naturally disposed to form beliefs in accordance with reason. So when we hold rational beliefs, their rationality is all that is required to explain why they are held. Causal explanation is only required for irrational beliefs. So this is the most radical rejection of the symmetry principle, because on this view, rational beliefs just have no causal explanation whatsoever. As Bloor sees it, this position is unscientific and anti-naturalistic. It exempts a certain class of events, namely certain types of beliefs, from the scope of scientific explanation, and so it violates basic scientific standards that we would apply in all other domains. After all, science has never recognised any such limits to the scope of its explanations. For the scientific sociologist, humans are part of the natural world, and everything we do is governed by causal laws. To suppose that scientific knowledge has somehow escaped from the causal web is to mystify science. Now, I think that Bloor is absolutely right about this, but I doubt that there are many philosophers who, on reflection, would endorse this kind of position. I mean, the majority of philosophers endorse physicalism, so they take human minds to be causal. Even those philosophers who reject physicalism would generally think that our beliefs have causes. So, I don't really think we need to discuss rather the teleological model in any detail here. But just to note that this is this is one way of thinking about this idea that that there's a fundamental difference between the rational and irrational beliefs. A more moderate and more plausible way to develop this idea is what Bloor calls empiricism, although do bear in mind that he's using the term empiricism in a rather different way to how it's often used in philosophy. Okay, what Bloor calls empiricism grants that rational belief formation is just another part of the causal web, open to causal explanation, but it holds that certain types of causes produce rational belief and other types of causes produce irrational belief. So one simple theory suggested by Bloor is the empiricist might hold that the uninhibited use of perception plus our natural reasoning faculties in our interaction with the external world tends to produce true belief, but that sometimes social influences interfere, leading us to false beliefs. If you build up your knowledge on the basis of actual sensory experience, not on the basis of myths and speculations of others, well, you're all set, right? That's how you should go. I mean, this need not be framed in normative or teleological terms. The claim is simply that the unimpeded operation of our animal faculties, let's say, tends to produce true belief, and so beliefs formed in this way are rational. Rational beliefs being those that we acquire by applying reliable methods. Now, I mean, one immediate concern about this is that even if we think that this account is correct, there may be good methodological reasons for sociologists to remain neutral. The reason is that every person is bound to treat as true or rational whatever beliefs they happen to accept. If they then suppose that rational beliefs are not socially caused, then they're going to look for the social causes of other people's beliefs, not their own, and they will be failing to subject their own beliefs to the same kind of scrutiny they take to others. So there may be good methodological reasons, even if you think this model is correct, to say that sociologists should still remain neutral with respect to epistemic evaluation of the beliefs they are studying. In any case, Bloor raises two further objections to this kind of empiricism. First of all, he says, we know that the natural operation of our perceptual and cognitive faculties does not lead to true or rational beliefs, or at least it doesn't always. It leads to a mixture of true and false, rational and irrational belief. Just consider perceptual illusions and cognitive biases. Indeed, Bloor notes that the same cause can produce both knowledge and error. He cites research showing that a medium level of anxiety will improve cognitive performance, but then performance drops again when anxiety levels go too high. So, you like increase the anxiety, okay, you get, say, better at remembering things, okay, but then as increase it too much, then you start forgetting again. So, there's no reason in general to believe that if we were to remove social influences, we would thereby develop true or rational beliefs, because our natural faculties can lead us to both the true and the false. Second, and I think more importantly, the empiricist relies on an individualistic conception of knowledge. The empiricist has the image of the lone scientist making observations, drawing inferences from those observations without allowing his conclusions to be manipulated by others. The problem is that almost none of our knowledge is like this. Clearly, science is a social enterprise, so consider how scientists must defer to other experts. A biologist develops models that must be compatible with contemporary physics. But why does the biologist accept contemporary physics? I mean, presumably she hasn't performed all of the relevant physical experiments herself. Indeed, even the average contemporary physicist hasn't performed all the relevant experiments. It took thousands of people, hundreds of years to develop theories like general relativity, quantum mechanics, the Standard Model. There's no way that any single individual could become directly acquainted with all of the relevant evidence. So there's no way that a single individual could have all of the relevant experiences. So scientists have no choice but to defer to the work of others. Or consider the importance of collaborative processes like peer review. Right? A belief is only validated as knowledge in science once it has been discussed with other people and it has survived challenges raised by those with other perspectives. Another general problem here is that people have a tendency to massively overestimate the role that direct experience plays in their knowledge. Here's an interesting example from Darren Lehu's book, What Did the Romans Know? For centuries, from ancient Rome to the 1600s, it was held that rubbing lodestone with garlic destroys its power to attract iron. This was a widely held belief, familiar to all educated people, as an example of what was known as antipathic interaction. What's more, the ancients claimed to have direct experience of this phenomenon. There are a variety of sources that talk as if the loss of the lodestone's magnetism on being rubbed with garlic was just a straightforward data point that had been experienced by many people. Plutarch says, "The lodestone will not attract iron if it is rubbed with garlic. We have palpable experience of these things." 15 centuries later, Bernardo Sisi says, "We know by daily experiments that the power of the lodestone is weakened by garlic." And there are many, many other quotes like that over the centuries. This supposed phenomenon was explained by the general theory of sympathy and antipathy of different materials, but it was not itself seen as a theoretical claim. It was just part of people's common sense experience of the world. It was a well-known regularity that any theory had to account for, which, of course, is all rather puzzling because we know that it's false. But how do we know this? Somebody with empiricist inclinations will naturally say, well, we know it by experience. We've investigated the world, we've tested these things, we can see that there is no such interaction between garlic and lodestone. But whose experience are you using here? I mean, surely not your own. Presumably, you have never rubbed garlic on a magnet to see its effects. You probably don't even know anyone who's done this, so you're not even relying on direct testimony from others. Rather, we know that garlic does not impede lodestone through a kind of rational coherence. We know it because of the theoretical claims that have been inculcated in us by our society. So the ancients thought of the world, they saw the world in terms of this general theory of sympathy and antipathy, where sympathy is a kind of attraction or harmony between different things and antipathy is a kind of repulsion or disorder. The attraction of iron to lodestone was one instance of sympathy. Another instance was that amber would attract threads and other small objects. But things that are strongly sympathetic to some objects will be strongly antipathic with respect to others. Amber and oil are antipathic. If you rub the threads with oil, amber will no longer attract them. And that phenomenon is actually true. That can be observed. Now, the ancients saw the world in terms of instances of sympathy and antipathy, and it was natural that lodestone versus garlic would, be brought into this scheme, just as amber versus oil was, because garlic has many other sympathetic and antipathic qualities. So once the garlic lodestone interaction was proposed, the idea quickly spread and nobody needed to test it. It was just one instance of a widely accepted general theoretical scheme that smoothly accommodated a wide variety of phenomena. Today, by contrast, we think in terms of magnetism, or the power of the lodestone specifically. Magnetism is a power that inheres specifically in magnets, and it's treated as importantly different from the triboelectric effect of amber. And of course, magnetism has nothing to do with garlic. There is, for us, just no relation at all between magnets and garlic. And again, we don't feel the need to actually test this. Because this is just, again, part of a general theoretical scheme that explains a wide variety of phenomena for us. There's no need to test this specific thing. Now, so the point is that even many of our common sense beliefs about the world are a product not of experience, right, not of us actually directly interacting with things, but of theoretical frameworks developed by others. Indeed, it's not simply that we rely on others for the justification of our belief or anything like that. All the beliefs that we hold, even where we do have direct experience, beliefs are mediated by social processes. And this is because language is a social phenomenon, and the concepts that we use to classify and understand the world are products of social interaction. To even talk about, garlic and magnets in the first place, that involves a classification scheme that has been inculcated socially, that depends on theories developed by others. The ancients did not classify anything as a magnet because they had no theory of magnetism. For them, the effect was not between garlic and magnets, but garlic and lodestone. So, social interaction furnishes our minds with, as Bloor says, the meanings, assumptions, standards, and purposes which we apply to our experience in order to interpret it and derive beliefs from it. Contra empiricism, there is no distinction between individual experiences and social influences. All beliefs are socially mediated. This final point connects to what might be the central philosophical foundation of the Strong Programme, a theory of meaning known as meaning finitism. Many writers on this subject have assumed that if meaning finitism is right, then truth and knowledge must be products of social negotiation. So meaning finitism provides a fairly direct argument for the Strong Programme's goal of applying sociology to scientific knowledge. Bloor does not discuss this at length in Knowledge and Social Imagery, but later work in the Strong Programme, including later work by Bloor, dealt with meaning finitism extensively. I'm drawing here in particular on Barry Barnes's article on the conventional character of knowledge and cognition. Okay, the basic idea of meaning finitism is that no sentence has any fixed meaning. The meaning of any sentence is open-ended. So, to explain this, any sentence that a person utters will involve the application of concepts, right? Any sentence will be constructed out of concepts. And the truth of the sentence is dependent on both the meaning of the concepts and the way the world is. If I say, the bird in my garden is black, obviously we can't evaluate this sentence until we fix a meaning for terms such as bird and black. So, we need to have the concepts of bird, garden, black, right, in order to evaluate the truth of this. How then does concept application work? Well, it's easiest to understand the meaning finitist's claim by going back to the start, as it were, and considering how languages are actually acquired. So let's consider the learning situation. Learning concept application involves an interaction with the physical environment, it involves receiving sensory impressions from the world, and crucially, it involves interaction with others in the society who can provide feedback concerning the learner's use of concepts. People learn the meaning of the term bird by learning how others in the community use the term bird. Now, teachers have a few means for inculcating competent concept application. The first is ostension. This involves making an association between a term and a thing in the environment. The teacher points to an object and says, bird. Later, she points to another object and again says bird. And from repeated experiences like this, the learner comes to associate the term bird with a certain class of objects. Now, ostension is, I mean, this is obviously a very simple process, but this is essential. This is an essential part of hooking our language to the world. It's the part that really kind of connects language directly to the world. The second method is generalization. Generalization is a means of indicating associations between terms. It tells us how an instance of one term is related to an instance of another. Generalizations related to birds will be statements like birds can fly, or birds lay eggs, or birds have feathers, and so on. And generalizations may be given with more or less probability. So people might say birds can usually fly, rather than implying that all birds fly. I mean, either way, this kind of indicates associations between things, and obviously generalization constitutes much of our knowledge. There is a final factor, which is that people develop competence in the use of a term by learning other related terms. Consider a child who learns the word bird after her parents point at birds in the sky. Then on seeing a plane, the child points at it and says bird. Well, obviously the parents will correct her and say, no, that's a plane. As the child increasingly experiences other objects that fly that are not birds, so she becomes a more competent user of the term bird. By learning what isn't a bird, the child will become better able to use the term bird in line with her community. Okay, these are the processes by which people learn to apply concepts. Members of a community build up their knowledge of concepts through ostension, generalization, and contrast with other concepts, where all of this is inculcated by previous members, by other members of the community. Now, every concept has what Barnes calls a tension. A tension is the things in the world that the concept picks out, where this is determined by the use of the concept in the community. Barnes calls this a tension to distinguish it from the extension. Philosophers of language commonly talk about the extension of concepts. The extension of a concept is the set of all the entities to which the concept properly applies, or which the concept properly picks out. Extensions are fixed. They determine the future usage of the concept. The meaning finitist denies that concepts have extensions. Tensions include only past instances of use. They include only the things that have actually been picked out by the use of that term so far. Future usage is indeterminate, and this is the key point. Even after learning a concept and becoming a competent user of the concept, the future application of a concept is indeterminate. So, the term bird has a tension, right? It's a set of objects, O1, O2, O3, to which the term has been applied by competent concept users in the society. Now, let's say we face some new object, we come across some new object, OX. Do we apply or withhold the term bird? Well, this is going to depend on the degree of relevant similarities between OX and the instances in the tension of bird, and on the degree of relevant similarities between OX and the instances in the tension of related concepts. And of course, for any two concepts, there will be a host of similarities and differences, and the world itself does not provide any scale for weighing similarities and differences. That's entirely up to us. The past usage of a term therefore does not determine the subsequent usage. I mean, in fact, there's nothing that determines the subsequent usage. So that is, when we encounter some new object, nothing in the world determines that the term bird is correctly applied. Defenders of the strong program like to appeal to Kripkenstein's skeptical arguments about meaning on this point. So if you're interested in more detail on this kind of argument, see my videos on Kripke's meaning skepticism. But anyway, the point is that when faced with some new object, it's up to us to make a judgment about whether any previously existing concept correctly applies to that object. Indeed, when faced with objects to which the concept has previously been applied, so when faced with O1, O2, O3, we still have to judge whether it was legitimately applied in those cases, and we can always decide that instances that are currently in the tension of a concept should be removed. There was once a time when whales were in the tension of the concept fish, but then they were removed, and they're now in the tension of the concept mammal. And all of this is a matter of social negotiation. The tension of any concept, the set of things to which the concept is legitimately taken to apply, is a matter of social negotiation. Of course, in the vast majority of cases, people agree on how to apply concepts. This is unsurprising because, I mean, humans share common psychological traits, and of course, any two people who speak the same language will have very similar linguistic training. So, you know, like most of the time, things just proceed smoothly without disagreement. We use the concept in the same way. But this doesn't change the fact that proper usage of a term is never determined in advance by, you know, meaning or logic or anything else. Each and every application of a term is supported through social negotiation. Proper usage is simply a matter of agreed usage. Okay, here's a simple but specific example. For a long time, Europeans had experience of swans. Every object to which they applied the term swan was white, at least under normal conditions. I mean, obviously, I guess, you know, some people might have a swan that's been painted black, or a swan that's run through some coal dust or whatever, but, you know, under normal conditions, let's say, every such object was white. And so the Europeans endorsed the generalization, all swans are white. Then one day, a couple of explorers go to Australia and they come across creatures that are just like swans, except they're black. And we can imagine two responses to this. So Verity, who is impressed by the similarities in overall morphology, concludes, oh, some swans are black, right? These are swans, and so some swans are black, right? She takes it that the term swan is applied to these creatures. Sydney, however, notes the very obvious difference in colour and also the, you know, different place that these creatures live, and he denies that they are properly called swans. He creates some new concept, some new name for them, and so he preserves the claim that all swans are white. I should note there are actually more wild possibilities also. We can imagine a third person insisting that actually the term white picks out like X-coloured objects in Europe but Y-coloured objects in Australia. So in fact the newly discovered creatures are swans but they're white, so we maintain a generalisation that all swans are white. And so, you know, there's these kind of wild possibilities as well, but, you know, two more natural responses would be Verity's and Sydney's. Okay, so which of the two is correct? Well, in the standard philosophical tradition, there is a right answer about whether the term swan is correctly applied here. In that standard tradition, the term swan has a meaning, and this meaning determines its application to all things in the world. The meaning of the term determines its extension. And this is just what the meaning finitist denies. There is no fact of the matter whether Verity or Sydney is right. Or at least there's no fact of the matter at first. Rightness consists in social agreement on how to use the term. So if the vast majority of other members of the community come to agree with Verity in using the term swan for these creatures, then it is correct to say that these creatures are swans, and so they would reject the claim that all swans are right. They would correctly reject the claim that all swans are white. What makes concept application correct is the consensus of a linguistic community. And obviously, this consensus cannot be determined in advance. So as Bloor puts it, and I quote, "There is no class of things existing in advance of the application of a label. Here and now, there is no determinate class of things which will or could truly be called swans. The content of that class depends on decisions which have yet to be taken, and so does not yet exist." Concepts are social institutions. And of course, the sociologist can try to develop causal models to explain these institutions, to explain why did Verity prevail rather than Sydney. Okay, now the natural objection at this point is to appeal to definition, right? So we might say, well, you know, look, yeah, we all grant that definitions are matters of convention, right? It's up to us how to define the word swan. But, you know, it might be objected that once a definition of a concept has been given, the extension of that concept is fixed by the definition. If we had included white in the definition of swan, then it would have followed that all swans are white, and the blackbirds in Australia would, by definition, not have been swans. So, you know, it may be the case that most terms in colloquial language exhibit this kind of indeterminacy of meaning, but that's, there's no reason why that should be the case in principle, right? We can avoid this problem by giving precise definitions. And if only somebody had given a precise definition of the term swan, right, then there wouldn't have been this disagreement. There wouldn't have been this disagreement about how to classify the things that were discovered in Australia. So this really is just a product of our failure to give precise definitions. Okay, so there are two problems with this kind of move. In the first place, any precise definition that I offer will be a purely individual matter. Nobody else needs to accept my definition. I can, of course, just stipulate that I'm taking swans to be white by definition. Then maybe there's a sense in which, for me, the Australian birds are not swans. But obviously, different people will come up with different stipulative definitions. And then the question will become, well, what causes one of these definitions to gain widespread acceptance? We are interested in knowledge as a social consensus, not in individual idiosyncrasies. And the precise stipulative definitions that people give are going to just be individual idiosyncrasies like this, right? Because there's not going to be complete agreement on those matters. And if there is complete agreement, then that again just becomes this question of, well, how did that agreement emerge, right? What are the causes, the social causes of that agreement? But second, and more importantly, you can't actually fix extensions with definitions anyway. So let's take the classic example, right? All bachelors are unmarried. Bachelor is defined as unmarried man. What this tells us is that the term bachelor and the phrase unmarried man pick out the same things. But what are these things? I mean, what is the extension of unmarried man? So if we had a problem specifying the extension of bachelor, well, this doesn't solve anything because unmarried man doesn't have an extension either. Both the concept of marriage and the concept of man are open to social negotiation. And I mean, actually, these two concepts are this is actually a great example because these are two concepts that, we have seen these social negotiations take place in debates about gay marriage, polygamous marriage, in a lot of the debates about what exactly gender is, right? We're seeing this social negotiation take place right now. So unmarried man doesn't have a fixed extension either, so definitions just don't help, right? Any definition that you give, right, that only works if the definition has a fixed extension, but you're never going to find a definition that has an extension. So that's the idea of meaning finitism. Now, how does all of this help support the strong program? Well, consider our imagined community of Europeans who hold that all swans are white. At time T, they visit Australia and they discover black creatures otherwise like swans. Now, if meaning finitism is correct, then prior to T, there is no fact of the matter whether swan correctly applies to these creatures. The world itself can't determine that. But now here's the key point. Given the nature of the world, and given how people use the terms, there's no fact of the matter that all swans are white. Indeed, given these things, there are no facts about all swans at all, because all swans has no determinate reference. So the generalization, right, all swans are white, right, is prior to T, knowledge in the community of Europeans, right? Again, this is, remember, we're not defining knowledge as justified true belief. We're defining knowledge in terms of beliefs that are invested with authority, that are widely accepted, etc. So, prior to T, at least, the generalization, all swans are white, is knowledge among Europeans. What is it that makes it knowledge? Well, it's simply that all of the things in the tension of the term swan are white, and the generalization, all swans are white, is a widely held, strongly held belief that people rely on in, making predictions and explanations and interacting with the world. So, like the world itself doesn't make this knowledge, but consensus bridges the gap. This counts as knowledge because it is the consensus and because it is used and relied on in that relevant community. Okay, let's skip ahead to T, when people discover the black swan-like creatures. Again, at this point, the world itself does not determine any truth value for all swans are white. Some people apply the term swan to these creatures, some people don't. Then there is a process of social negotiation, and the community chooses to classify the new species as a type of swan. So all swans are white becomes false. And the falsity of this hypothesis is a product of social negotiation. This was not and could not have been simply a discovery about the mind-independent world. Obviously, the world had an influence, right? Like, it was people interacting with the world. They discovered these creatures, and then so that had an influence on the theoretical beliefs that they accepted. But again, the falsity of this hypothesis is a matter of the way in which people are using those concepts, and that's a matter of social negotiation. If we decide that some swans are black, right, it's no use looking back after the fact and saying, oh, well, the black swan theory prevailed because it was correct, because it uncovered the truth, because it was rational. The world itself has, provides no guidance about how we carve it up. We're just faced with this complex array of sensory information, different conceptual schemes, will carve it up in different ways, and whether we treat these new creatures as swans or say that they're something else, that they're not swans, right? Whether we extend the application of swan or not, we would have socially mediated interaction with nature, right? On one option, we would maintain that all swans are white. On the other option, we would deny that all swans are white. In both cases, this theoretical knowledge is a product of socially mediated interaction with nature. Moreover, any consensus that does exist is never settled permanently. The question of whether the black swans are really swans, that can, in principle, always be reopened. Any concept application can, in principle, be reopened. Right now, there are black animals in the tensions of swan, so we say that not all swans are white. But for various reasons, this might change. So as Barnes says, the process whereby knowledge is evaluated, changed, and re-evaluated involves continuing reference to our shared goals and interests. All of our beliefs, then, are the product of the interaction with both nature and society. They're the product of socially mediated interaction with nature. Concept application and the associated generalizations and inductive inferences that concept application supports, these are social institutions. Knowledge is socially constructed. So that's the philosophical core of the strong program. Now, before we end, it's worth making a couple of clarifications about this position. The claim that knowledge is socially constructed can sound rather extreme, and I suppose it is extreme, but it's important not to misinterpret it. First, we all have a great deal of working knowledge of our external environment, where it's really hard to see how social causes could explain it. Suppose that I'm thirsty, and I see a cup of water on the table, I reach out, I pick up the water, I drink the water, quenching my thirst. Well, the cause of my mental representation of the cup on the table was not social factors. Rather, it's that when I looked around the room, I saw the cup. The cup was on the table, light reflected from the cup, transmitted through the air, created a pattern of stimulation on my retina. Okay, much of our everyday knowledge is built up in this way. Right, we avoid walking into walls, we avoid falling into rivers, we remember the location of objects, we satisfy our basic needs. This kind of knowledge is ubiquitous across the animal kingdom. But of course it would be very strange to give a sociological explanation for, how a chimpanzee navigates its environment. Now, Bloor accepts that if we're considering our practical everyday knowledge, our basic skills in interacting with the environment, our animal knowledge, let's say, animal knowledge is outside the scope of sociological analysis. These animal skills are simply taken for granted by the sociologist. And in order to explain these skills, we would then have to move to fields like biology and psychology. So just as a sociologist can't explain how a chimp finds food, she also isn't going to explain our animal knowledge in physically navigating our environments. But there are 2 points to note about this. This doesn't, Bloor thinks this doesn't really raise any kind of challenge to the strong program, because first of all, none of this kind of work is going to help illuminate scientific knowledge. Scientific knowledge involves abstraction and theoretical sophistication. It's a cultural product. Once we're talking about theories, we're talking about sophisticated conceptual structures, and that's going to open the door to sociological explanation via the argument from meaning finitism. And after all scientists share basically the same abilities in navigating their environments. All scientists have that kind of animal knowledge, right? Just practical skills to get by in their environment. But of course, they come up with very different theories. So the shared animal knowledge is a common factor among all scientists. As a common factor, it's not going to do much to explain the variation and development of scientific theories. The second point is that our basic skills are also understood through naturalistic causal models. Biologists and psychologists will use exactly the type of materialist explanation that Bloor wants to apply in sociology. And I mean, when we're talking about animal knowledge, then we're going to be appealing to things like the interaction of objects with our perceptual systems. The sociologist is going to appeal to social interaction. But in both cases, this is a naturalistic causal explanation. So it's totally coherent with the general strong program requirement of building naturalistic models of our knowledge. So this is one point, right? The strong program does not claim to apply to everything that we might think of as knowledge. It's specifically focusing on scientific theories, or maybe not just scientific theories actually, but theoretical knowledge. But the understanding of basic animal knowledge is not, at least according to Bloor, much of a challenge to the strong program. A second potential misunderstanding about the strong program is when people endorse social constructivist views of scientific knowledge, they're sometimes taken to be claiming that scientific theories are false or unjustified or maybe even morally problematic. So it's sometimes associated with the idea that scientific theories embody racist or sexist biases. There is, when people talk about things as social constructs, there is sometimes the implicit assumption that this is X is a social construct, therefore X ought to be changed, right? X is changeable, it ought to be changed. But this is not the view of the strong program. In general, according to adherents to the strong program, to say that a belief has social causes is not to say that it is false or irrational or unjustified. So giving a sociological explanation for a belief need not undermine our justification for holding that belief. Moreover, it's quite clear that science differs in significant ways from other social institutions, that scientific knowledge is justified in ways differently from how other types of beliefs are justified. And this must play a role in strong program explanations. Science demands that its theories be testable against experience, and then the relevant experience must be rigidly controlled. We accept as data only that which is, as Bloor says, repeatable, public, and impersonal. So science has strict norms for what counts as good observation and good experiment. Obviously this has an effect on the kinds of views that are given credibility, the kinds of theories that are invested with credibility in science. Now, of course, all communities, scientists included, will claim that their methods for achieving consensus are superior, more reliable, more truth-apt. The point of the strong program is simply that the sociologist, as a sociologist, acting as a sociologist, takes no stance on this matter, right? When constructing her models of knowledge development, the sociologist simply looks at the causes of belief and consensus. Okay then, so in this video we've examined the philosophical foundations of the strong program. Of course, the strong program is supposed to involve the scientific study of science. It is a sociological project. And the majority of work done by members of the strong program has consisted of detailed sociological case studies. I may take a look at some of these in some later videos, but I think that's enough for today. This is already pretty long, and that's again, this is the philosophical foundations, which is what I'm really interested in. So that's all. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.